Hello everyone and welcome to this video on Pluto in the 5th house. I'm Cassandra the Saffron Sage, helping you use astrology to evolve. We will talk about the mythology, the story of Pluto. Then we'll talk about the nature of the 5th house. And then we will talk about what happens when Pluto is in the 6th house in the astrology chart. Let's get right into the video. If you haven't already done so, you guys make sure you catch me on Fridays at 6:30, where I go live doing mini readings. You can PayPal or Venmo me and get a live reading with me. I do this every Friday at 6:30 Pacific time, and you can actually go and set your reminder to join us for that. So don't miss out on that, especially if you're new to this channel. And hit that subscribe button and the bell while you're at it. If you want more videos like this, more of the Pluto through the houses, videos on career astrology, money in the chart, and monthly, bi-monthly at least, energy reports on the full and new moons. So now straight to the video, guys. Pluto is the god of the underworld, watcher of departed souls. And when I started doing research into Pluto, you know, the basic story that comes up over and over is the Persephone myth. So the Persephone story is that Pluto kidnapped Persephone, took her to the underworld, and her mom, Ceres or Demeter, depending on which mythology you follow, got mad, understandably, and came after her. But by the time Ceres was able to sort of get someone involved, make a deal, try to get Persephone back, Pluto had already gotten her to eat pomegranate seeds, and for each pomegranate seed she ate, this kind of locked her in to a certain amount of time in the underworld. So what ended up happening is Pluto did keep his word and give her back, but because she ate those seeds, he ended up getting to keep her half of the year. So the story goes that when we have spring and the, you know, all the flowers are growing and everything's blooming, this is when Ceres has her daughter and she's not grieving. And that the 6 months that we have winter is when Persephone is in the underworld. Now, this is not a story of victimization. It's actually a story of empowerment because, first of all, according to some of the myths, Persephone got kidnapped, but others, she went willingly. So this story has a little bit more to it. That when I did some research, a lot of the research comes from mythopedia.com, great resource. Pluto was not really talked about in a negative light in any of the research I did. Very interesting. This is actually a story of empowerment because when Persephone goes to the underworld, she isn't just a victim down there, she actually becomes queen. And becoming queen of the underworld is a metaphor for becoming the master of our own subconscious mind. So whenever we call on Persephone or we work with Persephone, I actually did call on Persephone. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So, I mean, if you want to know more about that, we can do another video on that. When we are, and this is Pluto, you guys, when we are living out these past lives, these evolutionary, these karmic, these subconscious patterns, we feel powerless. But when we understand the deeper lesson, when we know our Pluto polarity point, when we understand how we might be unconsciously creating that behavior or attracting or somehow allowing that situation in our lives, when we have some kind of understanding of this, it doesn't make everything perfect, but we can begin to really harness our power and direct it to where we want to go. We can be queen or king of our own subconscious minds and therefore step into maturity, because that Persephone myth is about mother, maid, and crone. It's about going from a victim and a child, whether we're an adult or not, you know, going from that child archetype of things happen to me to that adult, mature, wise archetype of I'm harnessing my power in the ways that I can. This is how Pluto is, though, right? It's either it's going to rule us until we learn to rule it. Okay, that being said, other little tidbits about Pluto is that he is the god of wealth, the bringer of wealth, you know, because diamonds and jewels and money, it comes from underground. So this is interesting, especially if you think about like how power corrupts and about how they say money is the root of all evil and all these things. And also how a lot of people who do have wealth, they definitely preach mastering the subconscious. So these things are connected. Wealth and power, our subconscious minds, and what drives us, all interconnected here. So Pluto's identity was comprised of a couple different entities. So there's Hades, that Greek entity, and Pluton. So Pluton, aka Dispater, had power over the underworld and mineral wealth. Which, the underworld was known as the resting place for departed souls. A little bit about Pluto's family tree. Saturn was Pluto's dad, which means Poseidon and Jupiter were his brothers, and Ceres, Juno, and Vesta were his sisters, so this means Persephone was his niece. So it gets a little cringy there. And a little tidbit that I learned in my research is that the reason Pluto fell in love with Persephone was because Cupid shot a dart at him because Cupid didn't want him to be lonely down there in the underworld watching over all those departed souls. So the fact that he kidnapped her kind of shows a little bit about platonic love. That, platonic love is like, if I love you, I'm going to own you and possess you. I'm not saying that's good or bad. There are different levels of that, of course. So that's what I have on Pluto. So Pluto in astrology, the actual planet, represents our potential to transform. Again, the place in our chart where we either rule it, like it rules us until we learn to have power over it. Now, there are different things that can make this stronger or weaker for different people in terms of what makes a strong Pluto or a weak Pluto. But as far as like whether this is a strong influence in your life, we all have it. But some are going to have more aspects. Some are going to have conjunctions. Some are going to have the nodes in the same sign. Some are going to have it as a skip step, right? There are certain things that can make your Pluto lessons be more central to your life theme. And some that, will not be as much. But either way, Pluto is where we are going to feel like we have no control over this area of life. We desire it, right? Because Pluto is a soul's desire. And sometimes that soul's desire gets a little bit distorted into a desire to possess or have control, right? Pluto is usually where we want to be in control. And it's usually where we need to release control because the polarity point, which is the opposite sign and house of Pluto in your chart, is what to focus on to sort of allow in the evolutionary lesson. If you have a bunch of planets on Pluto, this is going to probably be a little bit more challenging. And then there are other things that can make this experience a little bit more, I don't want to say easy. Nothing with Pluto strikes me as easy, but there are some aspects, like the easy aspects to Pluto, can actually make it easier for you to understand and know what you need to do with those lessons. It doesn't make the lessons not show up. It just gives you more of an ability to go, oh yeah, I know what I need to do here, or to understand the lesson as it is unfolding. Whereas people with the more challenging aspects like conjunction, square opposition, those are going to be the ones where it's harder to know when it's happening, why it's happening. And even if someone were to tell you, it's not like that's going to fix it. So Pluto is a very, very significant planet in the astrology chart. I've always felt it as an anchor. It anchors us to that area of life. And to the amount that we're able to release and allow in the opposite energy is really the amount of evolution we're going to experience through that specific energy channel, I guess you could say. Other things about Pluto as a planet, this is generational. So it goes through a sign in like between 14 and 30 years, which means everyone born around the same time as you is going to have that same Pluto. And everyone born at that same time, based on the sign of their Pluto, is going to have a certain collective soul purpose. Now, these are the general themes. Everyone in your same class isn't going to have the same exact evolutionary lesson. So where it gets specific is what house, and then the relationship to the nodes as well help us determine, the actual lessons of Pluto for each person. There is also, Pluto by house is going to be how you moved through your past lives, what you're used to, kind of like an energetic comfort zone, what your soul feels like it wants. And that polarity point, which is the opposite sign or house, the opposite point in the chart, this is going to represent the potential for evolution. This doesn't mean you will do it. Sometimes, the way it works is Pluto, wherever Pluto is, you're probably going to cling to that way of being. And then a spiritual crisis will happen that knocks you off of that. And then if you get back too far into that same way of being again, that same, a similar spiritual crisis will happen until we learn how to integrate that lesson more. So knowing what and where your Pluto is really helpful to know where to focus, to avoid those crises, and also to just have a deeper understanding of our evolution. The sixth house is a cadent house, which means it follows a succedent house. The cadent houses are the sixth, third, sixth, ninth, and 12th. And the sixth house is really the house of work. It's the house of our daily habits, the things we do every single day, our schedules, our routines, our health, whether we work out, our habits. Really, the things that you have to do fall in that sixth house, duties and obligations. So now let's talk about what happens when Pluto is in the sixth house in the astrology chart. The evolutionary lesson on this placement is about service to humanity. It's about perfecting a craft, about duty and really humble service to society. So oftentimes this placement is going to come with some lessons of humility. It's going to come with lessons of what your proper role is in society. So you can have some challenges with being really attached to a certain role that, maybe is or is not right for you. You can have struggles with that. You could change your role in life. You can go through some transformations with what kind of job you do or what kind of work you do. You could experiment in different kinds of roles to see what fits for you, and more. During your evolutionary journey of the sixth house Pluto, you may find yourself wondering what your role in society is, or being forced to reckon with your role in society in some way. It's about figuring out where you can fit in to be the best use to the whole. Now, this placement comes with some humility, because it really is about being right-sized and finding the right kind of work, which means some of the lessons here could be having the wrong kind of work, right? Knowing what it feels like to have work that isn't right for you so you can figure out what is right. Being in roles where you're not accepted in your job. It's about letting go of what you need in order to do something for someone else. There's a sense of duty in the sixth house, of like obligation, of stepping up to something that maybe is less than desirable, but when you know what you're doing it for, you can do that work, right? It's humble service. This does not mean you can't be successful, so listen to the whole video. Things that fall in the sixth house are things like volunteering, things like caring for others, things like having jobs where you are of service to society, things like craftsmanship and honing your skills and learning the beauty of spending time honing a skill. The sixth house is the work that we do that we don't necessarily get credit for. Again, this doesn't mean you'll never get credit, but that there are lessons around this theme for people with Pluto in the sixth. So it's all about finding the real life ways, the grounded everyday ways that you can be useful to society and to the world. Because of the humility with this placement, if you have an ego attached to what you want to do for your work, it will be deflated. Every Pluto placement has a crisis, and each crisis will show up if you are really clinging to the house where your Pluto is, and the way out of the crisis is to look at the polarity point, which is the house opposite where your Pluto is. So if you have an ego with this placement, it will be deflated. So there's a process in life where you kind of have to figure out what you are not. And so again, that means you might be in situations where you are forced to see that. And that is usually not easy. It usually involves some negative feedback or somehow being in a role that isn't right for you until you figure out what is. If you think more highly of yourself than you actually are, you are going to hear about it if you have this placement. You cannot get away with that with this placement, with going into a job you just started and trying to give everyone advice. They will cut you down to size. The lessons of this placement just will not allow you to do that. And that's one of the things that will happen with the crisis side of this placement. If you try to go over your boss's head with this placement, you will get smacked from the universe. If you try to go over the head of your coworkers and try to like pull rank, or whatever, you don't follow the role that you are sort of assigned in your position, you will hear about it. Now, this could also show up in other areas, perhaps in family dynamics, where if you try to be your older sister's older sister or somehow step out of line, you'll get a bigger smack from the universe. Another thing about this placement is you're naturally going to have a lot of self-reflection. You're naturally going to want to figure out what is wrong and fix it. You're going to naturally want to look within yourself, see, purification. It's purification. It's wanting to be better. And while that is a good thing with this placement, you have to watch out that desire for purification, that soul's desire, ends up manifesting in a positive way. Because if it doesn't, it can lead to a lot of self-blame, a lot of self-criticism, a lot of being obsessed with what's wrong, getting really, really in the details and wanting to fix details that maybe aren't as even significant as like what you could do if you just kept going. So it is in alignment for you with this placement to really see what's going on within yourself and always want to purify. But there's a right way and a wrong way to honor the placement. There's a way that this purification can get out of balance and not really be productive. And there's a way to make it more productive. So we're going to talk about that. When you get stuck on little details and feel like you're doing stuff wrong, that is not the way to use this self-purification energy. Another way this can show up that is imbalanced is that need to sort of fix, right? That need to improve can be distorted into a criticism of everything in the environment. So you could just like complain about everyone else, and that it can project onto others. Other things that can show up when this placement is not in balance is you can feel not good enough. You can always feel like something is missing. You can be a workaholic with this placement. And if you are a workaholic with this placement, what's happening is there's this soul's desire to get better, and you end up keeping yourself so busy that you can't, it's almost like you can't hear yourself think, so busy that there's no time to deal with what actually needs to be dealt with. So this is one of the challenges of this placement, Pluto in the 6th, is you could end up almost becoming a workaholic as a form of avoidance. So at this point, I lost all video footage from hereafter, but the audio was just fine. So the rest of this video will be the audio with this beautiful picture. Another way this placement, the challenges can show up here, is you can get stuck in this trap of I'm not ready, just one more detail and then I'll move forward, right? All these different sort of stall tactics, and you won't realize they're stall tactics. They're going to feel like you really need to do these details. You really need to focus on this stuff. One of the ways for this placement to work with the energy is to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because your tendency with that desire to self-improve is to stop and then fix something, stop taking action and get it all perfect and then go. But the way to work with it is just keep going and try to get a little bit better as you keep going. Moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other is a really, really great way for this placement to get out of a rut, is just keep moving, put something out there, do something that isn't perfect, allow yourself to, release that hold you could have on the details if that's something you get stuck on. At times, this placement can also deal with the feeling of deservingness, like you don't feel like you deserve more than what you have. And so that can be another way that you can get stuck in a rut, is just not really trying to go for more. And that can happen in the workplace where you end up at a job that's below your potential just because it's a job. Analysis paralysis is something that people with this placement can really struggle with. And it can be, you cannot even realize you're doing it. You can find little stall tactics to avoid developing your own abilities. And developing your abilities, craftsmanship, getting better at something, taking that action to do humble service, that is all the right path for this placement, but there's a way to do it. So number one, keep moving your feet, keep going. Taking action, even if it's imperfect, is super important for this Pluto placement. And remember, you're going to have that inclination to stop and want to purge, because this placement wants to purge. It wants to, fix and get rid of all the things that aren't working. And you can still purge, but with this placement, don't stop, keep going. And the thing is that if you think about it and you have this placement, think about the times you have stopped to try to get more clarity. It probably doesn't bring clarity. It probably makes you more wound up and have more reasons to look for more reasons to get clarity, more reasons to purge more. And so that's part of why, action is the thing that's going to help you get that clarity. So there can be an aloneness with this placement, because it's like that busy work, the working all the time. This can be a form of this, just putting yourself on this hamster wheel. And remember, it's a general reading. Take what parts of this resonates and leave the rest. Other things this placement can do sometimes is reading things, not like self-development stuff that really moves you, but like more shallow or even just like, magazines, reading things for entertainment that aren't really necessarily doing anything for you. It's just there to fill a void. You can also eat out or go out all the time as a way to kind of avoid dealing with stuff. So this placement really is about the balance of taking action, but also taking the actions that you want to take with intention and then resting with intention. It's like you have a tendency with this placement to get stuck in the negative side of either one of those, where the resting that you're doing isn't intentional, it's not moving you to a deeper, more spiritual place, and the working that you're doing also maybe sometimes you can get caught in it not being intentional. And remember, not all of this is going to resonate. I'm telling you the worst possible scenarios, and then you can find where you land within them. So one of the best solutions for a Pluto 6th house person is routines. The right kind of routine. Not the perfect kind of routine, but the most effective and intentional routine, which involves time away that is spent for the purpose of self-development, really tapping into your intuition, giving yourself enough meaningful peace and quiet time to really connect and center with some kind of spiritual purpose. This might be a wisdom tradition, it might be a meditation book that you love, anything that has some kind of central core theme and some kind of tenets that you can apply to work. Okay, and the way that this Pluto in the 6th happens is that it's like work as a path to God. Okay, work is a path to the divine, work is a path to your highest potential, but it has to have to do with something faith related. Now, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to use the word God. It can be a wisdom tradition. It can be just some kind of belief system. Again, it can be a meditation book that you just love, that you can apply to your daily work. So it's important to have time spent away so that you can get in touch with your own self with this placement. Now, you will have a crisis with this placement if you get too sucked into your work, or you get too big for your britches. You get too you're assuming a role that isn't yours, that you haven't earned. Every Pluto has a crisis. With this Pluto, the crisis will happen more if you get too far away from humility, if you're sucked into routines that are kind of zapping you or taking your life force energy, or if you are not taking time out that's intentional. Again, it's like you can have the worst of both worlds, where you're going to work and you're on this hamster wheel of work, eating out, work, TV dinner, work, reading something, and it's like there's no moment to connect. So the further you get away from that moment to connect and being connected to what you're doing and how it's deeper meaning than just work for work's sake, that's the evolutionary lesson here. That's how you know you're on track. And remember that the crises will happen, usually in the form of criticism for this placement, self for others, to kind of bring you back to that need to be of service. The lesson with this placement is to see work as an opportunity to give. Now, depending on where you're at in the process of this may not sound very fun to you. But like, why don't we get work? Why don't we get something cool like creative self-expression? But every Pluto has its lesson, and when you are embracing the humility of doing the right kind of work for the right reasons, there's a beauty that can happen here. There's a balance and a centeredness that can happen. So again, this comes from finding this set of spiritual teachings that you can apply to your work so that it becomes more of a meaningful thing than just, this is the job I have. You can also, to incorporate these lessons, use the feedback you get as information. And this can be hard, right? Depending on where you're at with it, right? You could really feel like it's a huge crisis if the product of your work isn't received well, or you're not doing a good job. You can be really sensitive to when people don't like your work. So to really work with this placement, there's a need to sort of get yourself to a place where that is no longer an insecurity, where you can feel proud of the work you've done, where you feel like you're in the right role, doing the right thing. Some of the challenges with this placement too are going to be doing some job hopping, feeling like you don't fit in the roles that you've got, or even sometimes you can take a role that has nothing to do with your purpose just because it's a job. You could almost like miss the lesson totally if you're like in the zone of, oh, everyone else does this kind of job, so I'll just do this kind of job. And there's no thought to how you can fit into the bigger role. And that's kind of the idea with this placement, is how do your skills fit into the bigger society? And how can you show up to work every day and feel like you are doing work that is for a reason, like your skills are being used at their highest potential, and like you are a part of something bigger than you? Now, this can happen where you can try to fit in just based on like what you grow up around, without any real thought to what skill or, what you can bring to a job, what you can bring to the situation. Some people with this placement will end up getting the most regular, boring, everyday job you could have and give no thought to it and just think work is work and it doesn't matter. And that's like the base level that you could start with. And there will be crises. You'll find it meaningless, or you'll hate it, or there'll be other challenges that sort of reorient you back to that evolutionary purpose of learning to find the right work. And working as a path to God, finding the right work as a path to you feeling close to your spiritual connection, that's what's in alignment for this placement. And when you're honoring that polarity point, the way you do this is by having a spiritual connection. It's by having a clear understanding of your relationship with other people, your role in society, your role in your family, your role in your relationship. That doesn't mean you have to always take the back seat, but just that you know what your role is. And there is a clarity and an understanding and a good feeling you can get from this. And again, the lesson is to see yourself as one part of a greater whole, and to see yourself in a more holistic way instead of zeroing in on that perfectionist one little thing that you felt like you didn't get right. It's about understanding when to be of service and when not to. Understanding what your right role, right not being like perfect, but really understanding your aligned role instead of just working for work's sake. The discipline of selfless service as a spiritual path. And going from confusion about where you fit into the world to clarity, knowing this is my place. And once you've done that, you are so capable of helping other people to develop their potential. That's one of the gifts of this placement once you've honored and you're really integrating that polarity point. So that is what I have for Pluto in the 6th house. I hope this video helped you. Let me know in a comment below if it made sense, if it resonated. I always love hearing from you. Your comments are what help me grow so much, so thank you for all of them. And be sure to watch my channel because I'm doing a past life course upcoming in June. So if you're interested in taking that course with me, make sure you watch my channel for the announcements. There will be a wait list you can get on if you want to be one of the first people in. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for more videos like this, more Pluto videos and more videos on the energy reports of the new and full moons and tons of other astrology related content. And also join us on Fridays at 6:30 where I do live readings once every week, 6:30 Pacific time. You can go find that live upcoming video and click set reminder so you get that reminder, and go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell so you get the reminder for that reason as well. So come join us on Fridays for live videos, for mini readings. They're so much fun, and I will see you all in the next video.